Hello, and welcome to this podcast. My name is Dr. Jeff Pelton. I am a veterinarian, and I currently work and live in Santa Barbara, California. Today, I would like to discuss allergies in dogs and cats. I will focus mostly on dogs because we see far more problems in dogs than we do in cats. So in today's talk, what I would like to do is sort of outline some of the information that we have as far as dogs and their allergies. I'll walk you through briefly behind the physiology behind them. In doing so, I'm hoping that by getting a little bit better understanding as to why dogs react to do and an understanding of the reaction, the specific reaction that is occurring in the canine, then you will then be able to understand the treatments that I will also walk through and why some of them may work and why some of them won't. So, allergies are a very common problem these days. It is one of the main reasons why we see animals coming into our clinic. Allergies can manifest a couple different ways in dogs, and I will be getting into that in a minute. And then they can have a number of consequences, such as skin infections and excessive scratching and hair loss. A variety of different presentations that can create a lot of anxiety for the animal and for the owner. And so I would like to just start by giving you some background as to why and how dogs do this. So when I discuss this situation with my clients, I tend to find it much easier to be able to relate allergies in dogs compared to allergies in people, because as many people know, a lot of people have allergies, and they can manage them fairly effectively with a lot of over-the-counter medications. And a lot of my clients get frustrated because some of those same medications do not seem to work in dogs, and there are specific reasons for that, and we will go over that. So, as a brief background, when you compare dogs to people, when you discuss specifically about human allergies, one of the things to remember is that in people, when a person goes outside and they get exposed to something that they are allergic to, it doesn't matter what it is, whether it's a pollen or dander from an animal or any of those things. What ends up happening is we internalize the antigen, basically whatever that is, and the antigen or allergen is the protein generally that is going to be used that is going to then trigger this reaction. In people, when we get exposed to an allergen, we have a release of histamine into our system. And it is that histamine that creates the problems in people. And in people, that results in that manifests as hay fever, as most people are very familiar with. Hay fever with congestion, runny nose, sneezing, itchy eyes, and that whole cascade of problems that we get, mostly focused around our sinuses and respiratory system. So what does a person do? Well, a person who has allergies will typically then go to the store, and because all of this is triggered by histamine, they will pick up an antihistamine such as Benadryl, Zyrtec, Allegra, or something along those lines, and you will take it, and by doing that, you will reduce your symptoms. Obviously, some people know there are some other therapies for that, but let's just focus on that for now. So, when a human takes an antihistamine and then relieves his or her symptoms, this does nothing for the allergy itself. You will never correct an allergy. You'll never get over an allergy. All you're doing is controlling your symptoms, and we take antihistamines so that we can actually breathe and then go about our day. So the big difference between dogs and people is that dogs, in that for the most part, histamine is not involved. It is a separate pathway. Now, the pathway that exists in the dog, instead of getting a release of histamine that results in hay fever or congestion, because histamine is not involved, a totally different pathway, and it focuses on a specific pathway within the immune system where there is a release of what are called cytokines into the blood by white blood cells. There is a specific cytokine called interleukin 31 or IL-31, which when produced starts a cascade of reactions through the skin and through the tissues that cause an increase in itch. Some of the other side effects is that there is generally an increase in inflammation with white cell movement. And the resulting problem is that when a dog then is exposed to something that they're allergic to, they itch. They get inflamed, itchy skin. So you and your dog could walk outside and you could be allergic to the exact same thing, and you'll start sneezing and the dog will start scratching. And that's essentially that's the main difference right there. That is the main difference between people and dogs. So as a result, when people then give an antihistamine to a dog, it is not very effective. Most of the studies have shown that as far as antihistamine use, the best that anybody has ever shown usually is somewhere around a 20 to 30% reduction in clinical signs. So not very much at all. So focusing more on the dog, where dogs can differ is how this will actually manifest in the dog and what we see in our clinic. So we now know that dogs get itchy skin. But what does that translate into? So a dog, some of the ways that this can translate is that the dog can either chew on its feet. Sometimes they will develop rashes on their inner thighs and their belly, depending on where the exposure is occurring. Sometimes this reaction can occur all over, and you can get little hot spots all over the dog. And sometimes there are ear problems. Some people tend to get a little confused as to why dogs with allergies tend to get ear problems. And the one thing to remember is that in the canine ear, well, actually all of our ears, the ear canal, the cells that line the ear canal are essentially an invasion or an extension of the skin cells moving down inside into your external ear canal. So any reaction, anything that occurs in the skin itself has the potential for creating problems in the ear. And so one of the manifestations is chronic ear infections. Now, I'm going to take a quick note here and talk about ear infections in dogs and how they can be involved, and how sometimes that can be tough for us to interpret. So as a brief aside, let's talk about ear infections in dogs. Now, one thing to remember about ear infections is that ear infections are not spontaneous. They never are. Dogs don't just simply get ear infections. Ear infections always start as an inflammatory reaction. So there's always some sort of inflammation inside the ear canal. So the ear canal in a dog, for the most part, is shaped like an L. As it comes into the ear, there's a vertical component which goes basically straight down. And then it takes almost a 90-degree turn and then goes into the horizontal canal, which then ends at the eardrum. So when cells that line the ear become inflamed, essentially three things will occur. One is, as they become inflamed, this dead end tube, which is essentially what the ear canal is, this dead end tube, as they swell, becomes narrower. There's less room in there. It's not nearly as open. So you have less space. The second thing that happens is, obviously with most inflammation, is there's going to be an increase in temperature inside the ear. Again, not too surprising. Something is inflamed, the temperature goes up. And the third thing is it tends to increase in the amount of moisture or secretions inside the ear canal. So you add all those three things together. What you end up with is an ear canal that has suddenly become hot, moist, and dark, which is the prime breeding ground for just about anything that wants to set up shop and start growing inside the dog's ear. Now, as far as which organisms will then colonize the ear and create a problem, that is where dogs will differ. The reason we see a lot of yeast infections in the dog's ear is because, well, yeast is everywhere. And so it tends to be, in ear infections, that once the inflammation sets in, it's kind of a first come, first serve basis. Whichever organism gets in there first will basically be the most successful at growing and then keeping other organisms from taking root. So yeast, or Malassezia, is the most common organism, simply because it's everywhere, and so it's super easy to colonize. However, there can be bacteria such as strep or staph, which can create problems. And in some cases, we can actually get a rod-shaped bacteria, and I'll talk about that in a moment, which tends to be either Pseudomonas, Klebsiella, or Proteus. And those organisms can be very difficult to eliminate. So as a result, when dogs have this inflammatory reaction and subsequent ear infection, a lot of times that's what brings the dog in. And the owners are getting frustrated because we were just in here a month ago and we treated it and it cleared up and now it's back. And so that's a very, very common complaint. Now, as far as how the dogs manifest together, some dogs will only get ear infections. Some dogs will chew on their feet. Some dogs will get skin infections and rashes on their belly, like I spoke before. And some dogs will have some sort of mix and match of them. So again, you can have two dogs walk into a clinic allergic to the exact same things and yet present totally differently. One dog may be chewing on its feet and one dog may be having a rash on its belly. So moving back to ears, one of the problems that we have is that when we, as veterinarians, when we have a client coming back with chronic ear infections, yes, we obviously have to take care of the ear infection. That is what's creating an issue. But from a medical point of view, we are actually more interested in what started the inflammatory process to begin with. And obviously, dogs can get inflamed ears for a variety of reasons. Around here, Santa Barbara, one of the most common things is that dogs will go to the beach and jump in the water and have a great old time. And the combination of salt water and sand, if left inside of an ear canal, obviously most people can understand that would be highly, highly irritating. And so that can create inflammation and that can then result in ear infections. And so that happens, and depending on where you live, water is one of the more common reasons why dogs get issues with their ears. And that has nothing to do with allergies. That just has a dog who then may have chronic ear problems simply because they get debris or water or something like that in their ear. And so this is one of the challenges that we have in trying to diagnose allergies and whether or not these things are actually a problem. Now, as a side note, I would also like to make mention here that allergies in dogs are going to be a diagnosis of hindsight. Dogs can itch and scratch and get skin infections for a variety of reasons. And just because a dog comes in and they sort of check all the boxes or they fit the clinical picture does not mean that this dog has allergies. Allergies have a few characteristics to them which are sort of set in stone. And one is that they are, they're repeatable. They're cyclical. They tend to be seasonal. Now, that season may, depending on the sensitivity of the dogs may react consistently throughout the season. Or if, just like in people, where dogs are allergic to multiple things, then the season, you may actually be dealing with two separate seasons. And the intensity of the reaction may vary during different months out of the year. So, as I mentioned before, allergies are a diagnosis of hindsight. And so if a dog comes in and sort of says, okay, yeah, I look at it and I say, yeah, this sort of fits, but we've never had a problem with this dog before, I just tell the owner, look, we'll just kind of pay attention to this. But if the dog comes in a second time, whether that's going to be a month later or a year later, and then a third time, and then especially a fourth time, and these symptoms are all matching up and we're dealing with a sort of regular occurrence, then we can look ahead and say, okay, Mrs. Jones, I believe your dog has allergies. It is showing these symptoms and it is recurring in a either seasonal or regular pattern. So one of the things about allergies, like I said, is that they are repeatable. If a dog comes in, has a skin infection and a lot of scratching, and we take care of it, and the dog never shows up again for a single skin problem, that dog does not have allergies. But if the dog comes back, and whether like I said, a month later or a year later, same symptoms, same problems, we can sort of then, our confidence level then goes up. So the other aspect about allergies, and this is just kind of as a side note, is allergies are progressive. As we'll talk about in a little bit, when dogs react to something, when all of us react to something, we have a tendency, not always, but it tends to be proteins that we are reacting to inside the pollens or inside the danders or anything like that. It's usually a protein. And when you look at, say, plants, I would say the most common one that I see and the easiest one for me to just talk about is grass. If a dog develops an allergy to a specific grass, and this goes for people too, in a very short period of time, they're going to be allergic to multiple types of grass. It's because those proteins are so similar that your body and the dog's body is going to start cross-reacting and then identifying this other grass as something that they need to react to. And this is why over time, as a lot of people will know, that if they get tested by their allergist and they figure out what they're allergic to, and then 5 years later you get tested again, that list of things is going to go up and go up significantly. And a lot of those are going to be because they're related to what you started being allergic to. So as a result of that, allergies are progressive. And the other thing is just like in people, dogs' allergies increase in severity year to year. With the increase in severity year to year, what that means is as time moves on, as the animal gets older, the need for possible intervention will go up. And what worked to control the symptoms, say, 2 years ago in your dog, may not actually work this year, or we may need to supplement. And that is something that also can frustrate owners because they used to be able to get away with just a low level of treatment, but 2 or 3 years down the road, now they're having to spend much more money. So coming back to what we were originally discussing with regards to allergies and their presentation, the other thing that I would like to keep in mind, have people keep in mind, is when dogs come in, a very common presentation is that by the time the dogs come to us, they do not have just an allergy. What usually sort of happens with dogs is they get the itch, say they develop an allergy and they start to itch, and then say they get a rash on their belly and they start licking and chewing and scratching. And in a short period of time, they are going to traumatize themselves. And pretty soon that skin will become infected. And when that skin finally becomes infected, that changes things. The itch, sort of the level of itch that is associated with allergies is, say, low to medium. But the itch that is associated with a skin infection is quite high, and the dogs are quite miserable. And so when we deal with those situations, as I'm trying to discuss with the owners, trying to look ahead and get them ready for what to expect on the recovery on this, first and foremost, obviously, we have to get that skin infection under control. If we do, then the majority of that dog's misery is going to go away. But we're not going to be able to eliminate it completely by just treating for just the skin infection, because the allergies are still there. That is the underlying problem. So it typically takes a dual approach, trying to get rid of the infection and dealing with the allergies at the same time, so that the dog can get full relief. And sometimes it can take the better part of 2 or even 3 weeks before we can finally get that infection under control. And so when you kind of look down the road, it can take a grand total of 1 to 2 months sometimes before we even have to get the dog to the point where they're feeling better and their day-to-day life is much, much, much more comfortable. Okay, so we've kind of covered that. Now, going back to sort of the physiology specifically to dogs, and I shouldn't say that there are specifically to dogs because actually this pathway exists in both in people as well. In the situation where you have an allergen, as we talked about before, you have a release of cytokines into the bloodstream to help the other white blood cells in the tissue sort of deal with this invader. Let's put that in quotes, invader. Because this is the same process that occurs if there is a bacterial infection or something along those lines. If you get a bacteria invading your bloodstream, this is the same thing that happens. But in this case, what ends up happening is the definition of an allergen is something that triggers essentially an over response by the immune system, an inappropriate response, and that is something that is formed over time. Another thing about allergies is that you cannot be allergic to something you've never seen before. Allergies typically need a period of exposure, and then a period of non-exposure, and then a period of re-exposure. And that has to happen probably thousands and thousands of times. And at some point, for whatever reason, and we don't know why, something happens in that reaction, and instead of just having your air quote normal immune reaction to whatever this thing is, the body goes completely haywire, and this allergic reaction occurs, which is just a gross overreaction by your immune system and setting up a level of response that does not correlate with the level of insult, the level of infection, or the level of, in this case, say a pollen. So when this happens, excuse me. So when this happens, one of the cytokines, and cytokines are a group of proteins that all they are is they're messengers. The white blood cells release a bunch of them, and they go off and tell the cells and the tissues around them, hey, gear up for a fight. And there are multiple different types of cytokines, and interleukins are a very specific subtype. And in this case, the one that we are concerned about, the one that dogs have the biggest problem with, is interleukin 31. Now, interleukin 31, what it does is it then goes to different cells, and the cytokine, it binds with something in the membrane, and then on the inside of the membrane, there are receptors that then are activated, and those are members of what's called the Janus kinase system, or JAK, J-A-K. And there are multiple JAK receptors that have a variety of different functions, and most of them are very, very important. The one that is involved in allergies typically is the JAK1. And the other couple, there's a JAK2 and there's a JAK3, but JAK1 is the one that typically is involved with allergies. And when the JAK1 pathway specifically is activated, that sends a signal to the brain that interprets it as itch specifically. It will also then create a cascade of events that occur, and in the skin, what this results in is inflammation and a variety of other sub effects, I guess would be the way to put it, that also create more problems. It actually causes a reduction in the barrier function. All in all, basically, it's what we refer to as a pro-inflammatory cascade. So the reason that's important is because some of the therapies that we talk about function along that pathway. And again, circling back, this is why antihistamines don't work well in dogs, because this pathway has no histamine involved in it. And so the dogs who then they use this pathway, and this is then how dogs go from exposure to allergen all the way to itchy skin. So where does that leave us? Well, now we have a dog. So now we have a dog that is going to have this allergy, and we have to try to figure out, well, what are we going to do about it? Now, I am going to focus initially on environmental allergies. I will talk about food in a little bit and how they differ and how that can create its own problem. So with regards to this, then, just like in people, you cannot, the allergens tend to be, you're exposed to allergens in three different formats, or three different routes, I should say. One is inhaled, one is contact through your skin, and the other one is ingested. And those same routes are the same in dogs. So obviously, your dog has to go outside. So you really cannot help inhaled, and you really cannot help contact. I mean, that's just something that is going to occur. We can talk about ingested in a minute. But with regards to that, so since we cannot prevent this from happening, what do we do? Well, right now, our main focus for treating allergies is the cornerstone medications are Cytopoint and Apoquel. And I'll talk about those in a sec. So because antihistamines don't work well, as far as traditional therapies that people can do to help alleviate some of the things that the dogs can come into contact with, one is if your dog spends a lot of time inside, one thing that you could do is actually set up a filter in your house, especially specifically in the rooms that rooms that your dog likes to hang out in. You're going to want to get a HEPA filter. You know, the same thing that they do with people. HEPA, the whole thing about HEPA is that it has a micron size. It's so small it'll actually trap pollens and something like that. And you're just looking to reduce the load. The other thing that you can do on a regular basis for dogs is bathe them. Bathing actually is a very effective treatment for removing a lot of the stuff on their fur and on their skin. And one of the more common questions that I get is what kind of shampoo or a product or what can we do to help keep our dog, from getting this bad. And in a lot of ways, it doesn't matter. Something like your basic oatmeal shampoo is going to be just fine and is going to be soothing. And what we're looking for is just the physical removal of some of this debris and some of this these pollens and dirt and whatnot. And you really, really want to make sure you rinse the dog well. However, there are certain things that you can also, shampoos that you can also do that there are included that might help a little bit. One of the most common one that people are using now is a compound called phytosphingosine. It's a mouthful. Phytosphingosine. Essentially, what it is, it's found actually in a lot of human products too. It is a molecule that will help rebuild the lipid barrier inside in the skin. And as a result, it helps stimulate the production of some of these compounds that add a barrier function. And we use that term a lot, barrier function. The skin being the largest organ in your body, its primary function is to be a barrier, and that is to the outside world. And when we get a reduction in that barrier function, when we lose that, that is when all sorts of bad things are going to happen. And with this chronic inflammation that dogs have, and with the changes that occur in their skin, you lose that barrier function. And when that barrier function is lost, that's when bacteria can get in there. And that's when fungus can get in there. That's when you start losing things through the skin, and the whole health of the skin becomes compromised. And you can start setting up and if gone on long enough, with these chronic changes, you can actually do permanent damage to the skin. And then you're just, then you're always in a situation where you're compromised, or in this case, the animal is compromised. So sometimes using some of these products can really help at least a little bit and help the dog, keep its barrier function intact. Phytosphingosine is probably one of you'll see that in shampoos. You can see that in some of the other products like that you can just wipe on the skin. The other one, which is more just again symptom control, is pramoxine. Sorry, and what that is a topical anesthetic agent. It's been around for a long time. Basically, what it is if applied into a shampoo form, you bathe the dog, and essentially it kind of numbs the skin. It's kind of the equivalent of using some of the bug sprays with lidocaine. You put it on the skin, and the dog just kind of goes, ugh, I just don't feel that itch anymore. And so using something like that, like those products, can always help. When it comes to diet, one of the things that you can also do for diet, one of the main things that we can do, and we'll talk about food in a minute, is increase the fatty acid supplements in your diet, and we'll talk about those. So the reason fatty acid supplementation is so popular is because obviously fatty acids help nourish the skin. Of course, as a lot of people know, fatty acids are one of those things where the more they study them, the more benefits they find. They're good for your skin, your joints, your heart, your brain, your eyes, your memory, all these different things. And by getting the dog on a fatty acid supplement in the long run can really help increase, again, the health of the skin. Now, when you start a fatty acid supplement, one thing to remember is it's going to take 4 to 8 weeks before you're going to see an effect. There's a few products on the market right now that are actually topical fatty acid products. The one that we use in our clinic is something called Essential 6. And you spot it on the dog, kind of like you would some of the topical flea therapies. And I've had some people I use it mostly, I would say, for dogs with just kind of dandruffy skin, flaky skin, not so much the itch thing. As far as using it in the course of allergies, there's some data basically that shows that it can help. Some data shows that they don't help for whatever reason. We don't know if it's because it's just not the right kind of fatty acid, or the body's not absorbing it the right way. We just simply don't know. And so I have used it in cases of allergies, and I would say with limited success. Like I said, I tend to use that product a lot with dogs with a lot of dander or just naturally dry skin. And I've had a lot of great feedback from clients who just said, wow, the dog's hair coat is glossy, the skin is nice and moist, and everything looks great. So that's out there too. So if you're a veterinarian or you look online, you can see these things. That's another option for you, but it may or may not meet with the success. So going back to the fatty acid supplementation, the oral products, what they're finding, what a lot of people are finding is that in some of the newer information that's coming out is for dogs, the supplementation of fatty acids can vary for amount and dose, depending on what you're supplementing for. For a lot of skin problems and just overall health of the skin, something in the neighborhood of 50 milligrams per kilogram of the dog per day is sufficient. But if you're actually going to be dealing with either problem skin, chronic problem skin, or if you're dealing with, say, arthritis, you actually need to double that and get up to 100 mg per kg per day. And that can be quite a difference. Sometimes the dogs may or may not want to take that much fatty acid in their diet. So a quick word about fatty acids. In human medicine, fatty acids, we tend to use a lot of fish oil products. And right now, another last few years, a big popular one that's come out has been krill oil. And I tend to tell clients that I lump those under marine oils. So all the oils that come from the sea, so to speak. The reason why those products are so popular is because along with omega-3, which is sort of the big one that we're always concerned about, the omega-3 fatty acids, we're also dealing with omega-6s and some of the other fatty acids that are in there. And not only is the overall amount important, but the ratio of those amounts are important for the body to be able to absorb and use naturally. And the thing about marine oils is that they have a naturally occurring perfect ratio of, say, omega-3 to omega-6 fatty acids. And as a result, you don't have to do a whole lot to them. But the one problem with them is the taste. Those of us who take fish oil supplements or something along those lines, I can guarantee you, if you were to pop those capsules and put it in a spoon and take it, you'd get it would not be a pleasant experience. So one of the problems we have with fish oil is the taste, which is why we tend to put them in capsules. And fish oil in and of itself is one of the more expensive oils to process. So one of the upside to marine oils is that they're a no-brainer. They're just about ideal, kind of as is. One of the downsides to them is they're expensive and they taste bad, so they need more processing to do that. So marine oil, so the thing is, the other option we have are vegetable oils. Now, vegetable oils can be of high quality. Obviously, a lot of people know about flaxseed oil. Flax is a great vegetable, a great fatty acid supplementation. But what all vegetable oils have is they don't have quite that ideal ratio between omega-3s and omega-6s. And so as a result, when we're looking for ways to, we're looking to make a product, say for a dog, that is going to then carry with it the right level. These things veterinary products tend to be blends of marine oil and vegetable oil. The idea being is that you're going to keep your costs down by using less marine oil, but you're going to try and also still achieve that balance with the ratios of the fatty acids by adding in the vegetable oils, and you have to just try and find that. So a lot of times the cost differences between the products tend to be either basically which types of fatty acids, which types of oils are being used, how much marine oil is being used, how much of a high-end, say, flaxseed oil is going to be used versus something like canola oil or something like that. And so there's that. The last thing that happens with veterinary products is, because, again, they're usually trying to keep the cost down, these things tend to come in just oil format. They tend to come as a pump, not as a capsulated gel. And so it's you figure out the weight of the dog, say that's with this product is going to be 2 pumps. You put that in the food. Very easy to use. But one of the things we do have to deal with then is, by putting it directly on the food, we do have to deal with the flavor. Now, a lot of dogs don't have to worry about that. They'll eat anything. And so by putting a little bit of extra oil on the food, no big deal. But sometimes the taste profile can throw the dog's appetite off, and that's something you got to deal with. The last thing to remember is oil is, it's oil. Okay, it can smear. You pump this onto the food, and if the dog doesn't eat it well, you can smear that oil around the bowl, which not a huge problem, but depending on where you are in the country, and especially during the summer, that oil can get pretty rancid pretty quickly. Flies can get attracted to it. It just smells bad, and so you have to kind of clean the bowl a lot. So those are just sort of the more practical aspects of dealing with fatty acids and dealing with it. But overall, that is something we strongly encourage with just about every dog who has a skin problem coming into our clinic, is use of fatty acids in their diet. So moving on, the last sort of cornerstone, the last medications, or last thing I want to talk about are the cornerstone medications that we use with regards to allergies. And one is called Cytopoint, and one is called Apoquel. Cytopoint is an injection that is given at your veterinarian's office. And what it is a monoclonal antibody. Monoclonal meaning that it is derived from canine cells and canine proteins. It's a monoclonal antibody against interleukin-31. What I just told you a little while ago had a reason. So interleukin-31 was that specific cytokine that is released in this reaction. And what it is these are antibodies specifically to that protein. The way it works is we give the dog a shot of Cytopoint. That antibody goes in, binds with the interleukin-31, takes it out of circulation. By doing that, the liver can then metabolize it. And you literally then stop this whole reaction before it gets going. One shot, one dose of Cytopoint will last anywhere from 4 to 8 weeks. Dogs, on average, tend to be consistent amongst themselves. If you have a dog who's on Cytopoint, you will know that that this will last, say, 5 weeks. Or your dog, you might get lucky and have one that lasts maybe 7 weeks. Each dog is a little bit different on how they handle the product, but they tend to be consistent in and of themselves. The idea, the sort of the practical aspect of it is the idea behind it is that if we give a dog a shot and say it lasts 6 weeks, that whatever it is they're reacting to today, hopefully will not be around in 6 weeks. And so when we give the shot, we hope that even though it only may last a few weeks, that actually the dogs may find clinical relief and their clinical symptoms may be reduced for much, much longer. I've had people tell me like, wow, this shot's amazing. It lasted 6 months. I'm like, no, it didn't. It lasted probably 8 weeks. And then whatever was there, when it finally wore off, whatever he was reacting to was gone. So as a result, the thing about Cytopoint that's a little, that some people don't like is that it's one shot. You don't know when it's going to wear off, and you don't know when the dog is going to then become itchy again. And a lot of times there's a bit of a learning curve involved with this as you get to know your specific dog, your specific situation. And then, so it's symptom control, and the way our clinic sets it up is that once the dog starts becoming symptomatic again down the road, whether it's 4 weeks, 7 weeks, 12 weeks, it doesn't matter, they can just call and say, hey, my dog's starting to scratch again, I'd like to get in, and we can usually accomplish that as a technician's visit if it hasn't been too long, or if it has been a few months since we've seen the dog, we'll do just a really quick progress check and then give the dog another shot. So that's Cytopoint. So the benefits of Cytopoint, the pros to it, are that one shot and you forget about it. The other drug we have is called Apoquel. Now, Apoquel, it is a daily tablet, and what Apoquel does is instead of blocking the interleukin-31, what it does is it blocks the Janus kinase pathway, specifically the JAK1, and that is occurring on sort of the flip side of that reaction. So by blocking that specific pathway, you are then eliminating the signal going to the brain and the continuation of that. And so you're simply stopping the pathway a little bit further down the road. That's all it is. So Apoquel is a tablet that is given to the dog every single day. So the benefit of, that way it's kind of like a human taking an antihistamine. The benefit of Apoquel, one of the main benefits of Apoquel, is that it is very customizable. You can give it short term, you can give it long term. You can give it for say a few weeks and like, oh, my dog's not itching anymore, and you stop, and if he doesn't itch, great. If he starts itching again, start him back up again. And so it's very, very flexible in that way. The downside to it is you have to have a dog who can take medication. I have a lot of clients who have dogs, and I would say on average they're smaller dogs, but I have a lot of clients who have dogs who can find medication in just about any treat, any food, anything at all, and they just simply will not eat it, or they'll eat around it and spit the tablet out. So you have that. The other thing is you have to be able to remember to medicate the dog. And I know plenty of people who have lives that are just too chaotic. And, trying to remember to just give the dog a tablet every morning sometimes is a little much. So those are the downside to it. So because these two products work slightly differently, Cytopoint targets interleukin-31. Apoquel targets the JAK pathways. Some dogs may do better on one versus the other. Most dogs do great on both. Some dogs just seem to do better on one versus the other. And because of also this, it's also very compatible to give them together. I have a few dogs in my practice that during certain times of the year, they are so bad that they actually go on both and do a much better control. So final thing is just cost. Let's just talk about cost real quick. I'm not going to throw out specific numbers, but I tend to sit down and pencil out costs with regards to how much these therapies are going to cost. And because Cytopoint is kind of open-ended and they say 4 to 8 weeks, I tend to average, and think that, okay, say one shot is going to last 6 weeks. And then I compare that to, say, 6 straight weeks of giving that same dog Apoquel. And in our practice, the way ours, sort of from financial point of view, any dog who is under 50 pounds, on average, just general speaking, the Cytopoint tends to be more cost effective. And especially if the dogs are under 30 pounds, it's way more cost effective. Once you top over 50 pounds, the costs are either a wash or Apoquel ends up being more cost effective. Now, as I said, that's just a general rule. So it doesn't matter. I have plenty of dogs who weigh 100 pounds who are getting shots of Cytopoint because the Apoquel didn't work as well, or a variety of different reasons. So one thing to remember, so those are the two options that you have, and that tends to be where the allergies sit. One thing to remember is that this is symptom control. You're not going to eliminate your allergies. You're never going to get your dog over it. This is never going to go away. And one of the more constant things that I hear about is owners are thrilled that they've brought relief to their dogs, and then a couple years later they express frustration that they still have to medicate the dog. I tend to remind them that, well, for myself, if I don't take Allegra 6 months out of the year, I can't breathe, and it's a small price to pay. So that's, just remember, these are symptom controls, and everything that we do, between the supplements that we give and the different things that you can do, these are just designed to help bring more comfort to the dog, get them through these rough patches during the year. So I'd like to spend just a couple minutes real quick on food. So when a dog potentially has a food allergy, and there is a big we don't know. We simply don't know how much food allergy is out there. But on average, we think it's actually a lot less than what people tend to think. When a dog has a food allergy, I just also like to kind of circle back. Remember, again, just like in the environmental stuff, the dogs tend to be reacting to proteins. Not always, but they tend to be reacting to protein. And most of the protein in dog food comes from meat. So these tend to be meat proteins. And so when we have an animal who has a potential food allergy, trying to figure that out can be an extremely frustrating process. The two most common food proteins two most common food allergies that we see in dogs are chicken and beef. And that's not because anything is special about chicken and beef. Not at all. It's simply a numbers game. You go to the pet store, you flip over every single bag of dog food, and the majority of them are going to have one, either chicken of some sort, whether it's protein, meat, chicken fat, chicken meal, anything like that. Same thing with beef. So these things are just the most common proteins put into food. Therefore, they're the most common allergies that the dogs have. That's it. So, as a result, when we think a dog potentially has a food allergy, there are some things that would tend to tip us off, or at least increase what we call our index of suspicion. And first one is age, believe it or not. Less than a year and over 7 years. If a dog starts developing a brand new allergy and they're less than a year of age, or they're over 7 years old, food does is kind of higher on the list. And when I first started dealing with this, I had a hard time believing that, say, a 6-month-old dog could develop a food allergy. And a few years down the road now, yes, I'm a firm believer there. In fact, I've actually had dogs almost die at the age of 7 months from severe food allergies and the problems that they caused. So there's that. That's one sort of box that we check. The other one is time frame. Dogs who have food allergies tend to be symptomatic year round. If you have a dog who only only gets itchy skin in summer, it's impossible to be a food allergy because they're eating that same food year round. So the dogs who have food allergies will tend to react year round. The third thing is, and this is not always there, is that there tends to be concurrent GI signs. A lot of the dogs that I've diagnosed that I have diagnosed food allergies with, they tend to get itchy skin and usually like diarrhea, loose stools, or some sort of GI upset at the same time. Just because when they have these, we call them flares. When they have a flare, then both of these will happen concurrently. And so that raises your index of suspicion. So if you check those three boxes, then that raises the prospect of food. So what do we do? What do we do with this? Now, where Mother Nature threw us a curveball is that you can go get your dog tested. All right. Now, if you go get your dog tested, you just have to know whether it's a skin test or serum test, they're pretty equal, my understanding. It is incredibly accurate when it comes to environmental allergens. Just about everything that they're allergic to will pick up. However, skin or serum is a terrible test for food. It does not test well. You could have a dog who's ragingly allergic to chicken and it'll test negative. It is inconsistent and you cannot rely upon it. So what does that mean? So if we have a dog, if we have this situation where we think a dog does have a food allergy, we have to do essentially what's called a food trial. And a food trial is I tell people that it is a royal pain. The entire family, or the entire household, I should say, has to be involved. And the reason is because in order to do an elimination trial, what we have to do, we have to find a protein source and a carbohydrate source, just to be on the safe side, that the dog has never seen before in its life, has never eaten it. And we have to feed that food and only that food for 6 to 8 weeks. What that means is, now if you take your average dog, and let's just say you're dealing with a 9-year-old dog, how many different proteins has your dog in its 9 years consumed? Odds are it's probably consumed most of them. Beef, pork, chicken, and so trying to find a protein source that the dog has never seen before can be really, really daunting. So the choices that we have for diets in these dogs, they're called either one, novel protein diets. And novel protein diets are simply that they've made the dog food out of something that is just non-traditional. You've probably seen them made out of venison. Sometimes some of them are made out of duck. There are some specialty diets that people have been trying to make out of alligator. Some people have been trying to import kangaroo meat from Australia. Obviously, no dog in this country has ever seen kangaroo meat. And so there's that, which can be really hard to find. The other one is the newer one in the market relatively are called hydrolyzed diets. Hydrolyzed diets are, what they've done is through the process of chemical hydrolysis, they've basically busted up the proteins down into what we'd call peptides or smaller units, or almost down to their baseline amino acids. In doing so, what these things are is they are just simply no longer recognizable as protein. Even if it came from chicken, the body doesn't see it as chicken anymore. And so the nice thing about hydrolyzed diets is that it doesn't matter what the dog's eaten in its life. You can kind of fall back on these with relative confidence. However, and I will say this, is there are some recent studies that have come out to show that if dogs are strongly allergic to certain things like a chicken, let's say they are allergic to chicken, if you use a hydrolyzed diet based in chicken, they may still react. So that just further muddies the water. Anyway, going back to a food trial, what we know is that it can take weeks for the body to sort of flush out or eliminate or metabolize all the protein in its system that may be reacting to it, and then also all those clinical effects, all that inflammation, all those skin changes, everything that has to happen, those take time to go away. And so that's why we can't just change it over and expect the dog to be better in 2 weeks. When we do a food trial, we have to give it a minimum of 6. In our clinic, we like to do 8 weeks. And that is 8 weeks on that one diet, whatever diet we pick, and the dog can eat that diet and only that diet for 8 weeks. That means no treats, nothing at the park that it picks up off the ground, nothing at all. If you're doing this and someone lets the dog finish the last bit of their hot dog, you have just you're back to square one. And because that little piece of meat can set the dog off. I've seen dogs have reactions, have protein reactions and food allergies to flea control that is beef flavored, because they ingested that beef. There was enough beef in that little chew that it was enough to set the dog off. So when we do that, if the dog, then we get to the end of the 8 weeks and the dog is better, what I then do is I have the owner go back and feed the diet that the dog was on before. That means all the food, all the treats, everything that was there. And if the dog within the next week or so becomes reactive, has itchy skin, again, GI upset, diarrhea, whatever, we then throw our arms up and say, hooray, we know the dog has a food allergy, and that's where we stop. To us, we really don't care. We don't need to isolate the specific protein, because that's even harder. And then from then on, we usually then keep those dogs on those special diets. So one thing to remember is if you go to the store and say you are yourself are suspicious that your dog has a food allergy, finding the limited ingredient diets can be really, really problematic because let's again, not to scapegoat chicken, but with chicken, you have to like look down the entire ingredient list, because even though it says this thing is made with lamb and rice, it may be that the 15th ingredient down is chicken meal. And finding those diets in the feed store is really, really tough, and a lot of them simply don't exist. That's why those specific diets are generally not available to the public. They are essentially on prescription basis. You have to buy them either from the company like Hills or Purina or whatever companies now are making them. They are what we refer to as prescription diets. You need authorization from a veterinarian to be able to buy those, and they are expensive. If you have a small dog who weighs 20 pounds, you're putting him on a food trial, that's not going to really hit you too hard. But I can guarantee if you have an 80-pound Labrador and you need to do a food trial, that's going to run you a bunch of money. So anyway, that's food in a nutshell. It can be incredibly irritating, and it can be very, very difficult to sort out, and it can be very expensive to deal with. Now, from a straight statistical point of view, right now, like I said, it is an arguable situation, but right now, the way I tell my clients is if I get every dog in this country together in one spot and I was able to test them all, 80% of those dogs, 80 to 85% of those dogs are going to be allergic to environmental allergens only. The other 15%, give or take, is going to have a food component. Now, the biggest problem that we also have with food is that just like everything else, we don't know how much the food is contributing. Dogs tend to be allergic to multiple things, just like people do. And we simply don't know. And if you have a dog whose primary allergen is a food allergy, then you're going to make a big gain by changing the food over, and the dog's going to feel a lot more comfortable. But if the food allergy is only, say, 1 of 20, and is not contributing that much, feeding a really expensive diet, and a really specialized diet, I should say, isn't really going to get you a whole lot. It may not be worth it, and it's tough, and these can be incredibly frustrating. So, as we wind up here, I hope I have been able to accurately elucidate sort of the nature of canine allergies and the baselines from which we try to then educate people and then work from. I have always found that if my clients sort of know what is going on and why we're doing something, it tends to make a little bit more sense to everybody, and they don't get nearly as frustrated down the road when I tell them that we have to keep going or whatever. So, yeah, in summary, canine allergies, super common, super frustrating. And I hope that if you guys have any questions, I would strongly recommend you sit down and talk with your veterinarian. And like I said, we're the main goal with our treatments is going to be just to keep the dog as comfortable as we can. We can't fix allergies. I wish we could. And so during certain times of the year, you may end up spending a lot of time and resources on keeping your dog feeling better versus other times of the year. But this tends to be a combination of our cornerstone medications of Cytopoint and Apoquel, but also food changes, omega-3 supplementation, topical therapies, bathing, and some of these other things. And so I encourage you to look into each and every one of them. And hopefully that what I told you today will be able to bring some comfort to you and your dog. And thank you for listening. Bye.